Do you think of shopping as a hobby? Do you come home from work each night and maybe spend some time scrolling online, checking your favorite websites, maybe seeing what's on sale that night? Do you spend time on places like Instagram or Pinterest or TikTok looking for inspiration to see what should be the next thing on your wish list? Well, if you said yes to any of those things, then you're in really good company. According to Digital Commerce 360, when they did a study in 2018, 42% of American adults also consider shopping to be a hobby. That's 77 million people. And of those 77 million people, almost half of those people spent 20 or more hours online looking for items to purchase. They might be looking for those items on social media websites, maybe looking for inspiration, like so that Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok, or perhaps they are looking online at their favorite e-commerce website. Most of the people in this study were young, reasonably wealthy, and by wealthy, I'm not talking about millionaires, I'm talking about regular people, so probably upper middle class, and people who were pretty family oriented. So, do you think shopping is a hobby? I'm going to argue no, and I'm going to tell you why. Hi, my name's Em, and I like talking about finance, resetting your life, and everything in between. So if you're interested in those kind of topics, then hit subscribe. The Oxford Language Dictionary's definition of a hobby is an activity done regularly in one's leisure time for pleasure. So maybe you think, hey, shopping totally counts as a hobby. Well, there's a little more to it. So let's dig a little deeper. So there are four common types of hobbies. The first is physical. So that's hiking, walking, running. Maybe you participate in a sport or a local league. Those would all be considered physical hobbies. The next category are mental hobbies or intellectual hobbies. So that's if you really love to read, or you are big into puzzles, or you always like to learn something new. Maybe traveling might be considered both a physical and a mental hobby because you're learning about a new place and you are being physical. You're actually physically traveling someplace. Then we have creative hobbies. And I think that's what a lot of people think of when they're thinking about a hobby. You know, oh, that person is a really good musician, or they're really into art, or they are a scrapbooker, or they're a quilter, all of those kind of things. Those are all creative hobbies. Maybe you're a woodworker. Again, creative hobby. And then the fourth kind of hobby is social hobbies. So things that we do to be with other people. So those can be things like volunteering or collecting. So maybe you're a stamp collector or a coin collector. Those are all considered social hobbies because you are participating in a bigger group. And usually people who are big collectors of things also interact with lots of other people, which is why they tend to fall under the social group. So is shopping a hobby? Well, I can definitely understand why people might say, hey, shopping falls under social and collecting. I like to collect a certain brand, and I'm social because I go out and participate with other people in this particular activity. And maybe you're right, but I think I would argue that shopping isn't really a hobby. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I could see an argument for someone saying, hey, I think that shopping falls under social and collecting. I like to collect a certain item and I love to participate with my friends. And I could certainly see an argument for that. But I have a few reasons why I don't think that shopping should be considered a hobby. Starting with the fact that the primary purpose of shopping is to spend money. It's not to necessarily collect something. If it was about collecting something, then you could get things for free. But shopping is all about spending money. And in order to continue to participate, you have to keep spending. You can't suddenly say, hey, I'm going to continue my hobby with shopping, but I'm not going to spend any money. The two are interlinked. You have to spend money in order to shop. And while that might be fine if you have a lot of money, if you don't have so much money, then it's less great. The whole reason for shopping is to spend money. It's not a byproduct. It's actually the whole reason. So maybe you're going to say, hey, I collect a whole bunch of different items. Say, I collect a certain brand of clothing, or I collect a certain brand of handbag or shoe, or maybe I collect, certain trinkets or certain figurines, you know. Well, I would argue there's a difference between collecting something and shopping as a hobby. So you might collect the item and you shop for that item because that's necessary in order to collect, but you don't have to shop for those items. You might be able to get them for free somewhere. You might be able to trade with someone else so that you don't have to spend money. Spending money isn't inherent to being able to collect something. Now, if you're a collector, yes, you tend to spend more money, but it's not always about spending money. I'd also argue too that collecting usually is purposeful. There's a big difference between collecting to collect and collecting because you are collecting a specific item and knowing when to pare down. So the next reason that I don't think that shopping is a hobby is that it can be really mindless. And what I mean by mindless is, how many times have you been up at night and you have been online shopping and you've purchased something just for the sake of purchasing it? Not because you really wanted it, not because you planned to purchase it, but because you were shopping and you needed to purchase something because you wanted to. I know sometimes I've even gone into a department store because I'm having the afternoon to go shopping. And while I'm shopping that afternoon, I feel compelled to purchase something because I want to have a successful shopping trip. I'm not just going to window shop, I am shopping for the sake of shopping. I'd also argue that shopping as a hobby promotes overconsumption. Now, I'm not someone who is a minimalist. I like to buy things, obviously. I've managed to go through a whole bunch of money really quickly. But I would also argue too that over-consuming, having 10 of the same item, or purchasing things that you don't actually really, really want, isn't good either. It leads to clutter. It leads to you buying things that you don't actually need or even want sometimes. Sometimes you're just buying it for the thrill of buying it. You want that dopamine hit. Shopping isn't a hobby because it doesn't do anything to develop any sort of skill. And I would argue that part of having a hobby is developing a skill of some sort. Now, it doesn't need to be a skill like you're become a brilliant musician, but it's something that you are getting better at. Now, maybe some of you out there would say, hey, I'm a really big thrift shopper, and so I'm really skilled at finding great bargains. And I would agree with you. Yes, you're probably fantastic at that. But I might argue, are you a thrifter who happens to resell, and that happens to be your hobby, is that you go into thrift stores, you maybe purchase some items, you maybe fix them up and then resell them? That could be certainly a hobby. Or are you a shopper who goes into a thrift store, buys a bunch of stuff, and then have it sit in your closet or sit in the shelf in your house? Oftentimes, if you like shopping, then you purchase something and your future self doesn't even really want that item anymore. If you've ever decluttered anything, then you know that sometimes we buy things that we love in the moment, but that we don't necessarily want over the long haul. And I would argue that shopping promotes that. Finally, the thing that I would argue is that shopping as a hobby is actually driven by things outside of yourself. They're driven by these external factors. So they're driven by social media or by marketing, so that you are buying things that you don't necessarily deep down want, but you're being told that you want those things by all of these companies or by social media influencers. You're being told that that's what you want, when maybe it isn't really what you want. You might think it is in the moment, but when you really look at what you wear or what you do on a daily basis, you're not actually going to use those things. And I bet we've all fallen into that trap. I know I have. I've seen things online and I think, hey, oh, that looks really great. That looks great on that person. I'm going to purchase that too, when I know full well that I will never wear that item or I will never use that item because I'm not that kind of person. So a big thing for me is cookware. I'm a terrible cook. I wish I knew how to cook. I keep planning on learning to cook. I burn eggs. I'm so bad. So, but I have a lot of fancy cookware. Why? Because I've been online and I think, oh, I really need this. I see a YouTube video or I see an Instagram post expounding all the wonderful things about a particular cookware brand. And I think I will suddenly become a good cook if I have this cookware brand. When the reality is that unless I take some lessons about how to learn to cook, which could be a hobby, it's a creative hobby, right? Just not one of mine. It's not a hobby. Like I'm purchasing something I'm never really going to use and isn't going to be very good for me. So is shopping a hobby? Well, I know a lot of you might disagree with me and say, yes, it absolutely is. It gives you pleasure. But I'd argue it really isn't. There's no real purpose to shopping. Unless you're shopping for a specific reason, it's just a mindless activity. Maybe it does give you pleasure in the moment, but does it give you pleasure over the long haul? That would be my question. Or is it something that just fulfills you in that moment and then you end up having to deal with the consequences? Maybe it's that you've got extra clutter in your house. Maybe it's that you've gotten yourself into credit card debt. Maybe it's that you just purchased something that you're never ever going to use again and you don't really know, like my cookware, what you're going to do with it. So, is shopping a hobby? I'll leave that up to you to decide, but I definitely don't think it is. Thanks. Bye.